All right. Hey, it's Friday, everybody. And you know what? It's a special edition of Cloud Talk Live here in honor of Earth Day. Boy, we're excited to be here today and to be with you. So, with that, everyone, my name is Jeff DeVerter. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rockspace Technology and delighted to be with you today. Welcome to Cloud Talk Live. I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and where you are. You know the routine if you're used to coming around here. Just introduce yourself in the comments. You know what? We're going to have Cerny Kalshek up here in just a minute, and you're going to get a chance to talk to him, ask some questions. We're talking about sustainability today, folks. You want to get a hold of us, you can send us an email over at solve@rackspace.com. We've had some good emails coming in lately. I'd love to hear from you. Maybe you've got some suggestions for the program. Maybe you just want to send us a little feedback. That's the best way to do it over there. All right. So as I mentioned, today's episode really is in honor of Earth Day. Who's excited about it? I know I'm excited about it. Are you going to spend some time outside? I won't get to today, but I will tomorrow. That is for darn sure. Sean Gardner's here. Welcome, Sean. We got Dineshan from Delhi. We've got another one from India. Love it. We always have a great Indian contingent here. You guys are some of the best fans. Hey, and I've got Cerny Kalshek here. Cerny is Rackspace's CTO. He's been on the program before. He's been on the podcast before. And he's got a really great article we're going to be talking about today. Hey, we've got Akash here again. So and George from Mexico. Cerny, welcome back to Cloud Talk Live.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back, man. And I wore green in honor of Earth Day today.
You did. I wore gray in honor of Earth Day. I don't understand what that means, but it's what I had on, and I should have changed. But you're excellent. So, so this is fun to do a different sort of episode than the normal thing. And you know, in companies like ours that has this global reach, you know, we talk about and we read about in the news all the time about how companies can make these big impacts. But you and I were chatting before, and we've had the conversation before. But you know what? The change really starts individually, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely it does, right? You know, sustainability, first of all, if I back up just a little bit, I think every day should be Earth Day, right?
That's
right. We live in this planet, we cohabitated with other people. I think making every day a priority where we're thinking about the long-term sustainability of this planet is going to be critical, right? Having said that, you're absolutely right. There are many things that governments and institutions can do, but I absolutely do believe that sustainability starts with the individual. Right? Yeah. And if you bear with me for a minute, the example that I keep using is, when you think about sustainability, it starts at home. And it comes down to two things, right? Number one, are you using the right technology, or are you using the right solution for the problem? And number two, how do you manage your consumption, right? Very simply put, to kind of give you those two things, just pointing to what's in this room. There's, like, you see the lights up there and others, like, one of the first things we did when we went out and bought the home was to switch everything to LED.
Yeah.
Right. So it's newer technology. It is more current, consumes less energy. That's one part of it. You can feel good about it and leave it at that. But it really is more than that, because it's all about how do you actually consume it on a daily basis, right?
That's right.
Just sticking with that electricity metaphor, right? And if I flip back and show you the stuff at the bottom there, right? There's about four or five devices that are actually plugged in to the power supply, and there's like another 8 or 9 plugged in under this desk. And one of the first things that I normally tend to do, whichever house I go into, is to make sure that there is a switch that you switch on and off. Those things are off right now, right? The ones here are on, and when I leave the room, I switch it off. One of the things that most people don't realize is when you have those devices plugged in and you don't necessarily have a switch to terminate that connection, your devices are consuming power. When you're charging it, when you've left it, if you have a phone charger in the wall and you haven't plugged it into a device, it's still consuming, drawing down energy. So I think sustainability from a green sustainability standpoint starts with making sure that we're picking the right technology and we're kind of moving along with the right tech, but also it's about that personal responsibility of consumption and being very aware of consumption. When you put those two together, I think each of us can do a phenomenal job of helping. And you still do have to have companies and organizations and governments to do their part as well. But we can start at home.
Yeah, and when those governments and large organizations, they absolutely can do the part, but it becomes a lot easier to do the part when it's an outflow of your own personal practices, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
become this
yeah,
unnatural motion. And
right.
another thing I think is important to call out is obviously from a species perspective, we haven't been great about this in the past, which is why we find ourselves in the situation we're in
Right.
now. But the reality is this earth it is incredibly resilient, and it is responsive to change.
Mm-hmm.
And when we make that positive change, even if we weren't great yesterday, let's be great today and
Yeah.
make those individual changes we have. It's really interesting. You talk about how you put light switches and electrical switches on the outlet so that when you're not in the room using the things, they're not drawing power,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to look at electricity as this infinite resource. We live in
Mm-hmm.
this amazing country, the US, where we have such, the infrastructure is fantastic. The whole world is not like that. We're going to get in, talk about equity here in just a little bit.
Yeah.
But this past year I put solar in, and when you put those batteries in your house and you actually start to watch the meter and you realize that I need to turn some things off if this is going to last.
Yeah.
It takes this what seems like infinite capability and becomes
Yeah.
very finite, and it has really curbed my consumption opinions and attitudes.
Yeah. No, it's great that that you had that personal experience. I probably we as a family did the same thing a few years ago. Like when we used to live in California, many of you know I just moved to Ohio about a year ago. But for the many years we lived in California, I not only had solar, but I also had Tesla batteries.
Nice.
So the first 6 months of having Tesla batteries at home and the solar was all spent around, can I live off the grid?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It's just essentially that's exactly what it was. You went around the house saying like, wait, why is this running? And what does it actually
Who
do?
left
Like you
that
turn
door
on.
open? Who left that light switch on? Oh yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And so you become more aware of your consumption. It is not like, look, most people try to portray it as a trade-off between the modern comforts and that. It's not that. It's just being aware of it so that you
Right.
can make smart choices, right? Like I will be completely transparent, right? I love driving gas-powered cars. Like my favorite car that I've got like in the garage is a Ford Bronco First Edition, right? It
Oh
gives
wow.
you 16 miles to a gallon, right?
On a good day.
So on a good day, right? But what's important is, since I know that, right, it's not the car that I drive every day. It's
Right.
not the car that you kind of do that. So it is. I think it's all about having the trade-off.
Hmm.
It's all about being aware of it, because you on every other day I'm driving our electric, and my wife's hybrid is kind of what we're pretty much driving. I don't want to become a Tesla salesperson, either drive a Tesla electric or one of these things, but that's what it comes down to. And I start with the individual responsibility, because you can immediately start drawing the parallels between how that applies to an organizational thing. As a CIO, as a
Right.
CTO, how do you actually think about how your organization uses resources, and
Yeah.
how can you become a lot more smarter about it?
Well, and as we talked about before, we make these individual decisions. You and I both gone down the solar road, and it just, you don't want to live without stuff, but you make smarter decisions and turn things
Yeah.
off when you're not using them. It really gets quite basic. And when that then starts to infiltrate, let's get into software a little bit. When we would develop for client server,
Yeah.
those servers were just always on, and we architected and built for always on. But in a cloud
Hmm.
based environment where we now have the ability to turn things off dynamically, we can use smaller bits of computing, which allows for greater density in some of that stuff. That sort of thing has a very tangible impact on power consumed, on greenhouse gases, on these sorts of
Yeah.
things. And so we talk about the benefits generally from a business point of view. Hey, you can save money by utilizing this cloud and this technology, or or you can get greater capability or capacity when you need it. But there are very real impacts. In fact, Amazon made it part of their billing suite that you can get in a day later and look at what was your bill yesterday, but also what was the impact on the environment from a CO2 point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the hyperscalers, Amazon, the AWS, Azure, and Google, all have played a really leading role in the space. Amazon Web Services is an example. You pointed out what they do in the Billing Advisor, but they also modified their well-architected framework. For the longest point in time, there were 5 pillars of the well-architected framework. Yeah. Last December, they updated it to have the 6th pillar, and it was sustainability. So they're actually starting to get architects and designers to start thinking about sustainability as you're actually building these solutions. So really, you have to commend these guys. And to me, one of the undersold aspects of the cloud and cloud transformation is the fact that it is greener to go to the cloud. I'm never going to say green to go to the cloud, because the only way you're completely green is by stop using anything, right?
Yeah, right. Flip the light switch.
Right. Greener basically comes down to are they using clean sources to generate the energy, right? And all of these guys are doing that. Are they setting up the data centers to be engineered in such a way that the power and heating consumption is highly optimized? Are they leveraging technology in such a way? And given their scale, they do it better than anybody else. So, if I'm a CIO, like I used to be one for many, many years, if I was a CIO today, and by the way, I did this when I was at Nationwide 15 years ago. So we're not building any more data centers, because there's a much better way to right. both manage these things, but also drive down consumption through the use of virtualization at that point in time. But now it's cloud computing. You can right. drive that into your thing, but you got to be going to the cloud has got that benefit that a lot of people underplay, and it's pretty important to drive that.
It really is. Just because, from an efficiency point of view, from a density point of view, if you were still running the shop over at Nationwide and you would build a data center, would you do a great job? Of course you do a great job. But when you talk about it at a scale that the hyperscalers get to do it, and when they've got the focus of trying to do it as green as possible, we here in San Antonio, we've got some data centers in our backyard. Part of Azure's footprint is just over on the west part of San Antonio. And I thought they were crazy a couple of years ago, Srini, because they turned the air conditioning off. They start designing data centers without air conditioning. Yeah. And I thought, how can you do that in South Texas? Well, you architect for it. You plan for it. You plan for how to get, it doesn't have to be 85 degrees. You can actually run those servers at 105 degrees just with the right airflow and evaporation. Yeah. But just rethinking how it's done and the impact of scale is where so much of that comes into play.
The engineering, to your point, the engineering into data centers is just mind-boggling. It's phenomenal, right? For people who know that space or who don't know that space, you design data centers with hot aisles and cold aisles. You can run it at 105 degrees so that you disperse heat and cooling very differently. You consume power in a very, very different way. And these guys who run data centers for a living, you got to imagine that they are constantly driving that, because that every ounce of productivity or sustainability that they can drive is going to be phenomenal for them to be able to drive that.
That's right. Hey, you've got one of your good friends hanging out. Tom Hall is here, and he asked you a question about how green do you actually think that GCP, AWS, and Azure are?
Well, Tom, great to hear from you again. But I actually, that's why I constantly use the term greener, right? I absolutely do believe they're greener, because all 3 of these guys have committed to clean, renewable sources of power. Some of them have achieved zero carbon data centers. So they fundamentally are getting clean power coming in. Number 2 is what we just talked about, right? The engineering that actually goes into the data centers for heating, cooling, power distribution is highly optimized to be able to drive these volumes. And number 3 is just the scale, right? The opportunity. If I'm running a particular machine with 10 virtual servers that supports a particular company, These guys can run the same with a significantly higher density, with better distribution of workloads, and with as technology has evolved, you have more and more opportunities to build containerized applications that doesn't consume as much as the stack, or taking these containers and deploying it in a true serverless architecture where you're just acquiring that server capacity as you need it and releasing it right away, right? And so it's just, I think when you start thinking about the sources of power, the engineering that goes into the data center, and the ability to use these various technologies, it is significantly greener.
It is. And, and when again, it's that outflow. It's the theme of our conversation today. When you have the switch on the wall to make sure that whatever's plugged in isn't actually drawing power, and you take that mindset into your software architecture, how can I ensure that my amazing code that I spent days and hours sweating over is as efficient as possible in how it operates and in its environment that it runs it? How do I ensure that it turns itself off and its neighbors off when it's not necessary? It's that mindset.
One of the things I'll share with on LinkedIn here in the coming week or so is I pulled together a 3x3 grid of how you can actually think about consumption, right? And how do you use microservices, and when do you use microservices, when do you not use it, type of a thing. And it's all built with sustainability as the underpinning, right? It's like, how do you kind of optimize consumption in a cloud world to be able to drive that? So one example I would use, Jeff, on that front is, let's say you just have a departmental application, something that is that's important to the company, but it's not like mission critical. It's not used as highly as some other application. Obviously, the simplest thing you can do is try to figure out how you can run it in the cloud, because you get the advantages of all the underlying things that I talked about that these hyperscalers do. But I think a more I think knowledgeable and a more I'd say a more engineered way of doing that is, this application is not needed all the time. Mm-hmm. It absolutely is not, from an availability and others, like it doesn't need redundancy and those types of things. So you can architect it in such a way that it uses serverless architecture design, right? And you can basically build that so that it's used only as it's needed. And so now you've not only done put select the latest technology, the cloud and all those things, but you also put that light switch on the wall, right? Which is essentially, you've built an architecture that only consumes what you need. And that's a big part of what many organizations can do.
Well, and Tom calls out a great point as well. I'd actually kind of challenge some folks. If you think about architecting in this way, what are the negatives? Can you find a negative? Thomas points out another positive, a great security practice. If that code isn't sitting there percolating along, it's not a target. It's not a threat surface.
Yeah.
Attack surface.
And Tom, fantastic the point there. Security is a big aspect of it. When you do leverage those architects, true information security officers will come back and say, no, I don't trust serverless yet because I can't trust which server it runs on. But the thing is absolutely real. If you design it a certain way, you're not giving too much of a window of opportunity for people to jump in. You can put monitoring on how many times a serverless app is invoked and others. But that's a great point. I think the other aspect that is underpinned, which gets me to the other aspects of sustainability, is when you start thinking about the workloads and how you actually build these applications, you can lower the complexity. You can lower the complexity of the applications you build, right? My favorite pet peeve with architects is anything you ask the application architects, anything you ask them is it's all microservices. You got to build things with microservices. Microservices is a phenomenal technology. Don't send me hate mail, right? It's great. However, microservices is not simple. How you actually architect a microservice-based architecture is not simple. It is non-trivial, even for some of the best architects. Number two, if you start building applications using microservices, you're predominantly doing it to generate business agility. Can I do multiple releases? Can I do all those things? Well, business agility doesn't happen if you don't engineer the microservices properly, then your DevOps pipelines get complicated, right? What do you release when and others? So if you don't do it right, and if you don't apply it to the right problem, you increase the amount of complexity in your environment, right? And I deal with complexity as a problem with sustainability as well, because when you build complex architectures, you need really smart, experienced people who've done that before to do that, and we all know that those don't exist. Right? Like there's not that many people. Whenever I hear someone who says, "Oh, I've got 5 years or 10 years of building microservices architecture," I'm saying like you're lying, right? Because it's not what. So it doesn't mean that they haven't done it. It just means that it takes a while to kind of understand that architecture and build it the right way.
Right.
By simplifying it, i.e., starting to think of alternative ways like low-code, no-code approaches, right? Step functions on AWS or any of those things, like where you can actually think of building code a different way. You not only lower the complexity of the environment, you open the door for many more people to enter the workforce, right? So it actually starts creeping into the next aspect of sustainability, because the green part is what we've been talking about. I think that's phenomenal. But one of the other things we have to do is we've got to do it in such a way that we expand the economic opportunity for more people, right? What good is a green planet when you have so much income inequality and issues and problems with the thing that causes other problems with society? So you want a green planet, but you also want something where the human beings and the animals that inhabit the world actually can have a much more sustained future, right? And so I think from a technology standpoint, it's important that you start thinking about the complexity of the environment you're creating when you build these as well.
That's so true, and because we're a self-centered group, aren't we? So we think about the green planet, and because I want to go out and breathe, clean air. But of course, I have kids. You've got kids. We want this planet to be the folks who inherit it after us to have the same opportunities we had with it. But I love the point as well is that our impacts that we have here with you and I in America have global reach. And just as somebody, we got tons of folks watching us from India. What you do in India affects us, folks. We're all in the same sphere here, so it's imperative that we ensure that from a green point of view, we do what we can to make sure that and not just to heal it, but to help it to thrive. Because when it thrives, we thrive. And but then also to make sure that everyone has the same access to opportunity as well.
You want the people in the world to thrive as well, right? Because I think that's a very important part, and it's as I've gotten older, it's become more front and center for me, because it's look, we've been blessed, and like I feel like this country, this world has given a lot to me personally and to my family. But we also don't want to take it for granted, in the sense that, look, many other people haven't had the same opportunities. They haven't been, they haven't had the same opportunities. And part of the opportunity is, like, you can sit here and say, like, we're a meritocracy. So if you're smart, you should be able to succeed. And it's like, look, you don't realize that the rest of the guys, who also want to succeed, didn't have all those shoulders to step on to get to your meritocracy level, right? And if you didn't have those shoulders and you got there, more power to you. I wish there were more people like you. But the reality is, we've got to be able to, in some cases, make it more equitable for people. In other cases, make sure that we don't create something that is so complex that it only takes us experts to drive that, right? And then it becomes one of these negative cycles where, only experts can build it. So in order for me to get the expert, I'm going to go out and throw $50K more at this person to get there, right? And by the way, I've said this before, I'm happy for those people who are receiving the raises. However, it's the same small circle of people who keep going through that cycle. Meanwhile, 99% of the world is left behind. And we wonder why income inequality starts happening. We wonder why homelessness is an issue. Right? And unless we are able to solve it holistically, so that you make it sustainable from a green environment standpoint, from an economic standpoint where the opportunity is available to everyone, and from an equitable standpoint, which is essentially like if there are intentional or unintentional biases in how we build applications. So as an example today, you build a mobile application or a web application, you think about a phenomenal user experience on the web. What about people who can't hear? Or what about people who can't see? Right?
Yeah.
Are you actually thinking about them? And so, like, is equity kind of factoring into your decision is important. I'm not saying that should be the only criteria, but it should
But it
be an
is a
important criteria.
criteria. Yeah, it
Yeah,
should be something that gets considered. I
yeah,
completely agree with you. And you think about where we're going from a tech perspective. We take some of these high powered developers and engineers, and if they're creating some of this core capability that now is accessible from a low code, no code. You made this
right,
point before, but I really want to drive it home because I believe that as the cloud covers the globe, which it does at this point. I don't think there's a continent. Okay, maybe Antarctica that doesn't have a data center, but somebody's got a server down there. But that can be connected to through the low code capabilities. It lowers the barrier to people being able to be a valued member and contributing member in the workforce.
yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. It opens the gates. Doing those things, Jeff, opens the gates for several things. It opens the gates to veterans, right? Like who we should do more for, right? People coming back from that, like in trying to reintegrate into society. Like we need to give that. Like it can be used to help underprivileged communities who've not had the opportunity get their first step into IT and
Yeah,
technology. So it is. You're right. Like that's what I mean by it. It is. Let's be clear. It's not lowering the bar. It's lowering the complexity, right?
it's lowering the
You're lowering
complexity.
the
It's lowering
complexity so
the
that
yeah. Go ahead,
yeah, so
finish.
that you make it easy for people who haven't had that opportunity or are not essentially wired the same way you are, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to get into this, and that's all about that's how you drive sustainability.
Yeah, Joe Timmons. I want to address his point, and I don't want to go deep into the crypto thing, but I think our point that Srini and I are both aligned to is that you can take good tools like what we're talking about in cloud and capabilities and do very bad things with them. And we chatted a little bit about this before we went on the air, and kind of mutually agreed we're not going to go down to how to make crypto better, uh, but you can definitely do bad things with good tools.
Oh yeah, you can. I apologize for the noise, guys. Like there's a gardener there in the background, like who's making not my house, but the next house. But I was just reading the comments, Jeff. Like and it's one of the topics that I kind of wanted to stay away from was like, but my buddy Joe Timmons will bring it up, like for
Joe
sure.
jumps in. Thanks, Joe.
On crypto. Yes, sure, I've got thoughts on how you actually kind of balance that, but I really haven't spent the time thinking too much about it because I think crypto is one of those things that really continues to polarize and drive income inequality around the thing. Right? And the people who are tech savvy, who kind of understand this stuff and to kind of understand this and don't trust what's going to happen in the future and others, they're all betting on it and they've driven up this market and more power to them. You can't drive that. But I think that's one of those things that in my mind that it's technology that's I'm not going to say it's technology being used for bad purposes. It's just technology that is used for that could be used for better purposes, right?
Yeah.
Like it could be used for better purposes. So while the economic opportunity for the select few is huge for crypto and others, unless it is broadly sustainable to the world's population in general, and equitable as well. I think personally, like it's not saying that others are not paying attention to it. Personally, I haven't put the time and energy into even thinking about how do you make crypto better.
Right. Well,
I won't use the example I used with you, but I'll share it with Joe. I'll send you the message on Signal, so you get
send them a note. Say it over there. That's exactly right. Well, folks, a lot of what we're talking about today is in a blog article that we posted over on the Rockspace blog site, and we'll post it here in the comments. Maybe even put it up on the screen. But it's a great article that Srini wrote on all of this. You can get in and read all of that. But I think Srini, if we're one topic we have certainly circled around is it starts with our own individual responsibility.
Yeah.
And so, guys, while we're still on here, I'd love for you to tell me how are you going to enjoy your Earth Day or Earth Weekend. I can't get out and do much earthy stuff today because I'm working. I'm working for Serenity, but I am going to get my hands out and dirty in the garden this weekend, and I cannot wait. And it's going to be amazing. So comment and tell me what you're going to do to enjoy this little blue globe we've got here.
Well, since I've got Jeff working for me, like, I'm going to go enjoy the lake here.
I think you should. I think you should. Well, Serenity, thank you so much for being on. This has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And I love the point that you made before. Of course, all the good points are yours. It's everybody's individual responsibility. You got to start right now. It doesn't matter if you screwed up yesterday. You got to go do it right now. And then how do you
think about sustainability across all three dimensions, right? The
right.
environmental sustainability, the economic sustainability, and equitable sustainability for the whole world. Like, and I think if each of us kind of understand it and do our part, we'll do more than I can predict. We'll do more than what our government will do to get us to where we are, right? Because collectively, I think the power of what we all can do as citizens and others is way more than what a government can mandate.
That's right. That's exactly right. And when we've got a community like this one, we've got folks here from Iran, we've got Tunisia here, we've got all over India. You guys have shown up. UK is here. Folks in Central and South America is here. Yesterday we had Chile in here. We've had Brazil in here. Everybody, spread the word. Get out there, turn some stuff off, and enjoy your day.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right,
have a good weekend, everyone.
Have a great weekend, everybody. We will see you on Tuesday with the next episode of Cloud Talk Live.